The corridor beside Harrowfield Station had carried pedestrian traffic for decades, but by the time the event began, the narrow pavement was already scheduled for redevelopment. The public telephone booth that once stood beside the station entrance had been removed months earlier during routine infrastructure modernization. Its glass panels, steel frame, handset, and copper connection lines had all been dismantled and transporting to municipal storage. The location itself remained empty, marked only by a small patch of newer pavement where the base had been cut away. The first indication of the anomaly emerged during a routine telecommunication routing audit. Engineers reviewing switching activity in the regional exchange network noticed repeated incoming call signals directed toward the identifier once assigned to that booth. The routing system still contained the number in archival form, though the physical endpoint had been formally decommissioned. Calls should have failed immediately once the identifier reached the exchange layer responsible for verifying endpoint presence. Instead, the system behaved as though the booth was still connected. Incoming calls directed to the number completed normally through the switching network. From the perspective of the infrastructure, the call appeared to reach a destination. What followed created the initial uncertainty. The line began ringing. The ring signal persisted through the network exactly as it would for any functioning telephone awaiting an answer. That outcome conflicted with the physical state of the infrastructure. The copper pair that had once connected the booth to the exchange had been removed during demolition. Inspection records showed the lines cut and sealed within the underground conduit beneath the sidewalk. Without those conductors, no electrical path should have existed between the exchange and the booth's former location. The engineering team initially attributed the event to a routing artifact inside the switching software. Legacy systems occasionally retained inactive identifiers that could produce phantom connection states during test cycles. The calls were dismissed as harmless background behavior while the exchange configuration was scheduled for cleanup. The phenomenon continued the following day. Calls placed toward the decommissioned number again triggered the ring state. Each attempt produced the same pattern. The network connected the call, and the ringing tone propagated through the exchange as though a handset were physically receiving it. What complicated the assumption of a simple configuration error was the consistency of the signal duration. The ringing continued for exactly the interval expected for a physical telephone before an unanswered call terminated. The system behaved as if something were waiting at the end of the line. Engineers began tracing the signal path more carefully through the switching infrastructure. Each segment of the route confirmed that the call progressed normally until it reached the branch associated with the old street cabinet that once served the station corridor. That cabinet still existed beneath the sidewalk. During the modernization project, its interior wiring had been simplified, and the pair leading to the booth had been disconnected. Inspection of the cabinet revealed no anomaly. The connection terminals where the booth's pair had once been attached were empty. The copper wires had been physically removed from the conduit during demolition, leaving only unused space inside the junction block. No conductive path remained that could carry a ringing signal toward the surface. Despite that absence, calls continued to behave as though a device still occupied the location. At this stage, the issue remained minor. Phantom calls appeared occasionally in complex networks. Engineers documented the anomaly and scheduled a deeper configuration review for the following week. Then the signal began appearing without an incoming call. During an overnight monitoring cycle, the switching system registered a ringing state originating from the same identifier once assigned to the booth. The event appeared within the exchange exactly as though an external caller had dialed the number. No call had been initiated. The ringing signal propagated outward through the routing network, seeking a destination for the call. Because the identifier no longer corresponded to an active endpoint, the exchange attempted to deliver the call to operator fallback systems. Those systems confirmed the same detail. The call source was the retired booth number. Technicians reviewed the exchange activity, expecting to find an internal loop or diagnostic routine responsible for the signal. No such routine existed. The identifier was archived and inactive, yet the network treated it as the origin of an outbound call. The implication introduced a different category of contradiction. Somewhere within the infrastructure, the call was beginning. The physical site of the former booth was inspected the next morning. The pavement square where the structure had once stood remained empty. No wiring protruded from the ground. The underground conduit beneath the sidewalk had been sealed during demolition to prevent moisture intrusion. Municipal maintenance crews confirmed that the area had not been reopened since the booth's removal. Standing in that space revealed nothing unusual. Pedestrians moved past the station entrance as they always had. Delivery vehicles parked along the curb. The redevelopment fencing farther down the corridor partially blocked the view toward the rail platform. The location appeared ordinary. Later that afternoon, another spontaneous ringing event occurred inside the telecommunications exchange. This time, engineers initiated an experimental trace while the signal remained active. Rather than following the internal routing pathways alone, the team attempted to map the electrical characteristics of the ringing signal as though it were arriving from a physical endpoint. The trace produced a coordinate estimate. The signal's electrical signature behaved as if it originated from the exact underground conduit once used by the removed booth. Technicians returned to the site with portable diagnostic equipment normally used to locate faults along buried lines. When the instruments were activated above the sealed conduit, a narrow electromagnetic disturbance appeared within the pavement area where the booth base had once been anchored. The disturbance did not resemble a typical current flowing through copper wire. Instead, it manifested as a localized oscillation that rose and fell at the same rhythm as the ringing signal propagating through the exchange. The ground itself appeared to be transmitting the signal. At this point, the working theory shifted toward interference from an unknown electrical source. Construction activity nearby could have exposed hidden wiring or energized abandoned infrastructure beneath the street. Excavation records for the corridor were reviewed. No buried electrical installations existed beneath the location other than the now empty telecommunications conduit. The ringing events continued across the following days. Sometimes they occurred when someone dialed the retired booth number out of curiosity after hearing about the anomaly. At other times, the signal appeared without any external trigger. Each event produced the same electromagnetic oscillation within the pavement square. Residents living above the station corridor began reporting a faint interference pattern in nearby radios during the ringing intervals. The effect lasted only as long as the signal remained active. Once the ringing stopped, the interference disappeared. The phenomenon remained localized to the immediate area around the booth's former position. The exchange network continued to interpret the signal as legitimate telecommunication activity. Attempts were made to eliminate the identifier entirely from the routing system. The booth number was removed from active records and replaced with a null endpoint. Engineers expected the next incoming call to fail instantly once the exchange reached the removed identifier. The following morning, another ringing event appeared in the system. This time, the routing trace could not associate the signal with any existing number. The exchange simply displayed an incoming call state originating from coordinates that matched the street cabinet serving the station corridor. The network was responding to a call whose number no longer existed. Field technicians returned once more to the empty pavement square. When the ringing event began again that afternoon, the portable sensors placed above the conduit detected the same electromagnetic oscillation beneath the surface. The oscillation aligned exactly with the cadence of a telephone ring. Yet there was no handset, no wiring, no booth. Only an empty patch of pavement where a public telephone had once stood, and a signal behaving as though someone were trying to answer. The event marked the first confirmation that the anomaly existed independently of the original infrastructure. The network could remove the number. The wires could be taken away. The structure itself could vanish. But something at that location continued to generate the call. The telecommunication exchange serving Harrowfield Station operated within a larger regional switching network that connected thousands of endpoints across the metropolitan grid. Under ordinary conditions, every call entering the system passed through a series of verification stages, ensuring that its origin and destination corresponded to active infrastructure. The signal emerging from the removed telephone booth site bypassed those expectations. Once the anomaly had been confirmed at the pavement location, engineers attempted to isolate the phenomenon by severing every remaining telecommunications pathway that might still connect the corridor to the exchange. The underground street cabinet serving that section of the network was disconnected entirely. Copper pairs leading toward adjacent buildings were rerouted through alternate conduits. The cabinet itself was left electrically dormant, its terminals no longer linked to the switching system. For the first time since the initial detection, the corridor existed outside the telecommunications grid. 2 days later, the exchange received another incoming call. The signal again identified the same physical coordinate beneath the station corridor as its origin. This development removed the possibility that the event depended on any remaining wiring in the area. The cabinet had no active lines. The conduit beneath the sidewalk contained nothing capable of transmitting electrical current to the exchange. Yet the switching system registered the signal exactly as if it had traveled through the removed infrastructure. The call entered the network, and the ringing began again. Technicians standing above the pavement square heard nothing audible during these events. The signal existed only within the electromagnetic disturbances detected by the portable instruments and within the switching behavior of the exchange itself. Nevertheless, the phenomenon began influencing nearby electronics. Small deviations appeared in wireless communication devices carried by pedestrians crossing the corridor. Mobile radios occasionally emitted brief bursts of static during the ringing intervals. The interference pattern followed the same rhythmic cadence as the network signal. The area of disturbance remained tightly confined to the square of pavement where the booth had once stood. Attempts to triangulate the source from multiple instruments produced identical results. The signal originated from a point approximately 1 meter below the surface, precisely where the base of the removed booth had once connected to the underground conduit. At this stage, a telecommunications engineer proposed a simple explanation. A previously overlooked conductor might remain embedded within the pavement, unintentionally functioning as an antenna capable of transmitting residual electrical oscillations into the network. Municipal crews reopened the pavement square. The excavation exposed the sealed conduit exactly as demolition records described. Its interior contained no wiring. The cavity was empty from the cabinet connection point to the location where the booth's base had previously anchored above ground. After documenting the conduit, the excavation was filled and sealed again. The ringing events continued. Several days later, the anomaly introduced a second complication. During one spontaneous ringing cycle inside the exchange, an operator monitoring the system noticed that the call appeared to be waiting for an answer. Under normal conditions, a call without a responding endpoint simply rang until the network terminated the attempt. This call persisted longer than expected. Instead of ending automatically, the ringing continued beyond the usual interval, holding an active connection state within the exchange routing table. The operator initiated a manual answer through the fallback system normally used when automated endpoints fail. The moment the connection opened, the ringing stopped. No voice transmitted across the line. What followed instead was a brief electrical oscillation that resembled the feedback produced when a handset is lifted and the circuit closes, the kind of signal that would occur if someone had answered the booth's receiver. The exchange recorded the connection as complete. Then the line went silent. The signal terminated several seconds later without transmitting any audio content. The behavior introduced a new dimension to the anomaly. The network could interact with the call despite the absence of physical infrastructure. Subsequent attempts to answer future ringing events produced inconsistent results. Sometimes the signal ended immediately when the connection opened. At other times, the connection remained active for several seconds before the oscillation occurred. One feature remained constant. Each interaction with the signal produced the same localized electromagnetic disturbance beneath the pavement square. Telecommunications administrators recognized that the phenomenon could eventually interfere with the stability of the switching network if left unmanaged. Phantom calls originating without identifiers created unpredictable routing conditions inside the exchange software. A procedural adaptation was introduced. The coordinates associated with the station corridor were assigned a dedicated monitoring channel within the switching network. Any signal originating from that location would be intercepted and isolated before entering the broader telecommunications grid. From that point forward, the ringing events were directed to a restricted circuit used exclusively for the anomaly. Field C. Sensors installed beneath the pavement square continued measuring the electromagnetic disturbance during each event. The oscillation remained precisely synchronized with the ringing cadence inside the exchange. The anomaly had effectively become an endpoint within the telecommunications system despite lacking any physical device. Months passed. The redevelopment project around Harrowfield Station progressed, replacing older storefronts with modern structures and widening the pedestrian corridor where the booth had once stood. Construction crews installed new lighting fixtures along the pavement, embedding electrical conduits that ran only centimeters above the sealed telecommunications line beneath the square. The ringing events continued throughout the construction period. Occasionally, workers reported brief interference in portable radios while standing directly above the location. The disturbance disappeared the moment they stepped away from the square. The phenomenon remained invisible to anyone not monitoring the network. Inside the exchange, however, the signal never stopped appearing. Some weeks it occurred only once or twice. Other weeks the ringing appeared multiple times across consecutive days. Each event followed the same pattern. A call emerged from the coordinates beneath the pavement, the restricted circuit intercepted it, and the ringing cadence propagated through the monitoring channel until the signal faded. The booth itself had been gone for nearly a year. Pedestrians now crossed the widened station entrance without any indication that a telephone had once occupied the space. Beneath their footsteps, the sealed conduit remained empty. Yet within the telecommunications infrastructure, the system continued reserving a circuit for a call that originated from that coordinate. The ringing still appears inside the exchange routing table. And when it does, the pavement square above the buried conduit produces the same narrow electromagnetic oscillation, as if a telephone somewhere beneath the ground continues to wait for someone to answer.